Picture this: a black ocean, a small ship, and a secret the enemy doesn't know exists. Our title says it all. Japanese couldn't believe one escort sank 6 subs in 12 days. And by the end of this story, you'll see why that disbelief turned into shock, and then into a change that rippled across the entire U.S. Navy. We begin in the Solomon Islands in May 1944. On paper, USS England. Hull number DE 635 was just a Buckley-class destroyer escort. Compact, practical, and built for duty that bigger ships didn't want. In reality, England carried something new that promised to turn submarine hunting from guesswork into geometry. Forward on her deck sat a launcher that fired a dense ring of contact-fuzed mortar bombs ahead of the ship. If they touched a submarine, they detonated. If they didn't, the sea stayed silent and the sonar picture stayed clear. No thunderous depth charge washed to blind the ears. No waiting and hoping. Just a clean solution. Find, track, fire, verify at the same time. American codebreakers in the Pacific were pulling threads from Japanese radio traffic. Those threads pointed to a route, a schedule, and a target. A Japanese submarine moving along a corridor the U.S. needed to keep open. England's job was straightforward on the chart and nerve-wracking in real water. Get in the way and make sure that submarine never reported what it saw. Contact, a track, a speed, a bearing that wouldn't sit still. Anyone can sweep ocean with a beam. It takes training to translate echoes into decisions. England's team, led by Lieutenant Commander Walton B. Pendleton, trusted what the instruments were saying and what their drills had taught them. Stay on the contact, keep the target solution updated, and fire without losing the picture. The first engagements were tense and, crucially, transparent. When those forward-thrown charges missed, the sea didn't erupt in a roar. The sonar stayed readable. When they hit, there was no ambiguity. The first success came quickly and decisively. The target was the large Japanese submarine I-16, a veteran of the Pacific War. The chase was classic. Radar awareness, a crash dive by the submarine. Then patient tracking as the enemy tried every turn and depth change. England pressed in, fired, corrected, and fired again. Evidence rose to the surface. Oil and debris that matched a submarine's depth. The U.S. side logged the positions. Japanese records later confirmed the loss. England had opened her account. That kill didn't happen in a vacuum. The Imperial Japanese Navy had set a screen of submarines across waters the Americans needed to cross. It was a picket line, watchers placed in sequence, eyes for a fleet that couldn't afford surprise. Break the line, and you blind the scoutmaster. That became the mission. England joined 2 sister destroyer escorts to form a compact hunter-killer team. 3 small ships, 1 big assignment. Radio silence from the enemy meant no more step-by-step coordinates. Fine, the group fell back on the fundamentals. Radar by night, sonar by day, and nerves that didn't fray when a hard contact twisted and dived. Soon, radar caught a submarine on the surface. Another of the picket boats hurrying to charge batteries before the sun fully claimed the horizon. Down it went, and the rhythm repeated. Find, fix, attack. This time against RO-106. One ship after another took a shot. Misses happened even with the right idea. At sea, almost counts for nothing. Then England moved in. The crew had already lived the cycle once. They kept the wire tight, corrected for each evasive turn, and delivered a pattern that paid off. Multiple detonations, a violent underwater concussion. When the light returned and the slick spread, there were no survivors to tell the tale from below. The position went into the log. Later, it matched what the other side wrote in its own records. Second submarine down. The group pushed on along the patrol line. Another contact. Another day of trace and pursue. This time the quarry was RO-104, and she had a captain who knew the book on evasion. He turned inside patterns, varied depth, and dared the surface hunters to be perfect for longer than any human should have to be. One by one the escorts tried and failed to land the decisive ring of contact charges. Then the division commander, watching the pattern unfold, gave an order that would pass into Navy lore. He sent England in to finish it. There's a quality to a team that has solved the same problem. Twice in a row, you can hear it in the brevity of voice reports, see it in how nobody crowds a station, and feel it when a firing key goes down without a tremor. England put her pattern out, not blind but guided by a continuously updated track. The sea answered. A hammering series of detonations ran together into a rolling, metal-tearing sound that sonar operators knew too well. When the pieces came up, RO-104 was gone. 3 submarines in roughly 3 days, each one located, tracked, and struck in a way that could be cross-checked later by both navies' paperwork. If this sounds methodical, that's because it was. The weapon mattered, but the discipline mattered more. England's officers trusted their radar and sonar, and the crew around them trusted a routine that left no spare seconds. Load the launcher. Calculate the sink time. Account for the target's likely turn during descent. Fire far enough ahead that the submarine meets the circle, not the other way around. Then verify. Always verify. Another night, another surface radar blip. RO-116 this time, and a commander who tried a different gambit. Instead of going deep, he stayed relatively shallow and maneuvered sharply, betting the Americans would aim low. It didn't work. England adjusted the fire control solution to match the real depth and put the pattern where the submarine was actually going, not where habit said it should be. The result was ugly for the target and undeniable for the hunter. Wreckage and oil. Mark the spot. For down. By now, the story of a small escort doing big things had outrun the ships themselves. Reports moved faster than water. In Washington, the top of the Navy read the action summaries and sent back a simple message of recognition that sailors repeated everywhere. A promise that there would always be a ship named England in the United States Navy, out at sea. The crew who'd earned that sentiment didn't pause to savor it. The picket line was not yet broken. 2 more. Submarines were still on station, and a weapon that many captains had doubted was writing its own doctrine in real time. The team turned northeast along the charted line. The Japanese were learning, too. Radio silence tightened. Surfacing windows shrank. Evasion shifted from loud, radical moves to quieter choices that produced fewer sonar clues. But the fundamentals hadn't changed. Batteries still needed air, and air required the surface. If England and her companions could be patient and keep the search grid tight, opportunities would come. They did. RO-108 made her appearance and went under fast. The escorts traded attempts. Another miss. Then the call that had become routine and still felt momentous each time. Go ahead, England. Forward throwers readied. Operators called out range and bearing changes and clipped reports that stacked into a mental picture. Fire. The ocean spoke back with a series of almost simultaneous hits. The kind that mean the ring landed exactly where the target's hull had to be. RO-108 didn't linger. The pressure hull failed quickly. The evidence on the surface left no doubt. That was number 5. Stop for a second and test the scale of what's happening. Within less than 2 weeks, a single destroyer escort had been present at the destruction of 5 enemy submarines. Each kill traced by positions in American logs and confirmed after the war by Japanese records. The work was precise and, more than that, repeatable. This wasn't a miracle run of luck. It was training, teamwork, and a weapon system, used exactly as its designers intended, with continuous contact and unemotional corrections. But the most complicated hunt still lay ahead. The last submarine on the line, RO-105, would try tactics that forced England to solve the problem in a new way, patiently, with ammunition to conserve and a target captain who refused to offer a clean solution. Stay with me, because this final duel is the reason the title of this video isn't an exaggeration. It's a record that stands to this day, and it turns a small ship into a legend. England wasn't just winning. She was changing the rhythm of the hunt. 5 submarines down in less than 2 weeks, each loss recorded by position, wreckage, and, later, by the other side's own documents. Word of the little escort's performance rippled outward, across task groups at sea, into operations rooms ashore, and all the way to the top of the U.S. Navy. Compliments traveled fast. Orders, sometimes, traveled faster. There was talk of pulling England off the line to guard more valuable ships. For a moment, it looked like the hunt might end early, but the picket line wasn't broken yet. 2 boats remained, and the next contact would prove that the hardest problem is the one solved after everyone thinks the job is finished. The target was RO-105. A compact Japanese submarine with a captain who understood that survival depended on restraint. No flamboyant last-second turns. No noise that painted a bright trail for sonar to follow. Go deep. Go quiet. Wait. Night fell. Search beams probed empty water. Radar caught flickers of possibility and lost them again. Patience set the tempo. Then, at last, a return that wasn't a ghost. A surface trace. A crash dive. Silence. England's operators leaned into the picture. Thin, intermittent, and never quite steady. This was the kind of contact that tempts a crew to force the issue, to throw a pattern at uncertainty and hope for luck. They didn't. The forward launcher stayed cold while the team built a better solution. Minutes stretched. The ocean drifted and the submerged target drifted with it. Miles of current that could shift the fight out of a carefully drawn grid. Ammunition wasn't endless. Every attack meant 24 bombs expended in a heartbeat. The men on England did the mental arithmetic, the same way they always had. Save shots for moments that could be verified, not guesses that would blur the water and the record. Finally, the picture sharpened. A faint line became a track, depth. Estimates steadied. Speed crept up from almost nothing to something you could plan against. England came in, bow on, keeping contact the whole way. The order went out. The arc of steel left the rails and fell forward into the sea. Silence. A mist tells its own truth. No muffled thunder to wipe the sonar slate clean. The contact was still there, slipping, adjusting, never handing over an easy intercept. England repositioned. Another attack. Another tense listen that ended with the sea refusing to answer. The hunt wore on. Hours, not minutes. A lesser ship would have lost the thread or the nerve. England's advantage wasn't magic. It was process. Operators called ranges in crisp, even voices. Plotters updated the board without crowding one another. The captain weighed each attack not as a gamble, but as a calculation. If the target continues at this course and this depth, where will the ring meet it? If the target changes either, where should we be when it does? A new pass. A better angle. The launcher spoke. This time the ocean answered. First a sharp, definite detonation. Then others close enough together that the human ear almost ran them into one sound. The ship shivered, then steadied. On the surface, darkness swallowed details. Below, the geometry had closed. When dawn spread out, the proof came up with it. Oil, fragments. And the end of RO 105's patrol. England had done it again. 6 submarines in 12 days. Think about the scale of that. Not 6 skirmishes with indecisive outcomes. 6 separate engagements, each culminating in evidence that stood up when checked against enemy records later on. A destroyer escort with a crew numbering in the hundreds had just erased 6 submarines and their eyes and ears mission from a critical stretch of ocean. The picket line that once looked like a net now had a gap so wide that operational plans could sail through it. What made it possible wasn't a single trick, it was a convergence. Intelligence that pointed hunter ships toward the right patch of water, disciplined radar and sonar teams that never let go once they found a contact, and a forward-throwing weapon that allowed the ship to attack without blinding its own ears. The Hedgehog's logic was simple and ruthless. If the bombs exploded, you had hit something solid. If they didn't, you hadn't. No ambiguity. No waiting 15 minutes for the sea to calm. Just feedback. That a well-trained team could turn into the next correction. The effect on confidence was immediate. Crews across the fleet heard the story, and instead of dismissing it as a fluke, they studied how it had been done. Sonar operators practiced holding contact through the stress of an approach. Fire control teams drilled the mental timing between release and impact, learning to lead a target that was already trying to slip the ring. Ammunition handlers shaved seconds without cutting corners. The mission wasn't to be dramatic. It was to be repeatable. News of England's run stirred more than curiosity at headquarters. It stirred pride. A short, memorable message came back from the top. Few words that sailors repeated to one another as both compliment and promise. The men aboard didn't need the encouragement to keep doing their jobs. But it didn't hurt to know that their precision had been noticed by the people who issued the orders. And across the ocean, in a very different building, a very different kind of report crossed a desk. Submarines that had checked in no longer answering calls. Patrol stations suddenly, inexplicably empty. A string of losses with no survivors and no radio distress. The pattern was clear even if the method wasn't. Something ahead of those American escorts was catching submarines while they were still in the act of slipping away. Here's the most surprising part. The legend you think you know about England ends with the sixth submarine, but the story doesn't. The ship kept working, escorting, screening, and escorting again. Often in the background of larger operations where destroyer escorts did their job and let the headlines go to bigger hulls. The weapon that England had proven didn't stay rare. It spread. Training shifted to match the way one determined crew had used it under pressure. Doctrine updated. Tactics evolved. The lesson wasn't that luck had smiled on a single ship. The lesson was that the combination of contact, calculation, and a forward-thrown strike could tilt an entire theater. But legends pay a price. Months later, far from that 12-day gauntlet, England would face danger that no sonar could predict at long range and no pattern of charges could stop in time. That part of the story is sobering and important because it shows how quickly fortune can swing at sea and how service doesn't pause once a record is set. Before we go there, take a second to appreciate the human scale behind the statistics. On England's side, young operators whose hands didn't shake when they keyed a report, petty officers who corrected without shouting, officers who weighed risk with the coolness that training buys. On the other side, submariners running blind under meters of water, choosing between speed that made noise and silence that let batteries drain. None of this was abstract. Every decision had weight. Every hit was final. 6 submarines in 12 days. A sentence that sounds like hyperbole until you lay out the track charts and the positions that match the other Navy's own records. That's why the title of this video isn't just a hook. It's the documented truth of a small ship's impossible-sounding run. Stay with me. In the next part, we'll step through the aftermath. What changed in the US Navy because of England, what the Japanese side learned only after the war, and how a single line from a 4-star admiral turned into a promise sailors still quote. We'll also follow England to a day when the sky, not the sea, became the threat, and see how a ship that had hunted so precisely could be hurt in a single terrible moment. 6 submarines in 12 days. Say it out loud, and you can hear why the enemy didn't believe it. A single escort, smaller than a fleet destroyer, had just torn a hole through a picket line designed to warn an empire. The shock wasn't only in Tokyo. Across the US Navy, operators and officers took notice. This wasn't a lucky streak. It was a method. Contact held from first ping to final proof. A forward-thrown attack that didn't blind its own ears, and a crew that treated every pass like a solvable equation. Word traveled fast. The message that sailors repeated was short and unforgettable, a line attributed to the Chief of Naval Operations. There would always be an England in the United States Navy. It wasn't just praise. It was recognition that a small ship and a new weapon had rewritten expectations. Not long after, the citation followed. Formal language acknowledging extraordinary heroism against enemy submarines behind. The words set the same hard evidence. Positions in the logbook, oil and debris on the sea, and, after the war, enemy records that matched the coordinates. What changed because of those 12 days? Training. First, sonar teams across the fleet drilled to hold contact through an attack instead of relinquishing it to the thunder of depth charges. Fire control crews practiced the quiet arithmetic that England's men had executed under pressure. How long the projectiles took to fall, how far a submarine might travel in that time, how to lead a turning target so the ring met the hull rather than chasing it. On deck, crews worked the launchers until reloads were muscle memory. None of it was dramatic. All of it was decisive. Doctrine shifted, too. The logic of the forward-throwing, contact-fused pattern. Hit and you know it. Miss and the sea stays readable. Became standard practice. Destroyer escorts, built in numbers to make oceans smaller, now had a playbook that matched their purpose. The weapon had been British in origin, American in adaptation, and proven by a U.S. crew that trusted what the instruments said even when tradition tugged in another direction. And the enemy? In the moment, there was only silence. Patrol stations that stopped reporting, boats that didn't come back, and no distress calls to explain why. The method England used remained a mystery to the men who went down with their ships. Only later did surviving records close the loop. the names of the lost submarines, the dates of their final signals, the positions that laid over the American charts like two transparencies snapping into place. England did not become a museum ship. She went back to work, escorting convoys, screening carriers, running patrols that only make headlines when something goes wrong. That's the nature of an escort's life. Success looks like routine, and routine rarely gets remembered, but those 12 days never left the Navy's bloodstream. Tactics spread, confidence rose. The next cruise to face a hard contact at night had a template to reach for, and a reminder that precision beats spectacle when lives depend on it. There is, however, a sober turn in this story. Months after the last submarine went down, England found herself under a different kind of threat. Fast, sudden, and coming out of the sky. Radar and sonar couldn't stop a pilot determined to trade his aircraft for a hit. The moment came in the spring of 1945, during the brutal campaign for Okinawa, when small ships bore the brunt of repeated, desperate attacks. England's record as a hunter could not make her invulnerable as a target. The strike was devastating. In a heartbeat, compartments that had rung with clear voice reports and steady bearings filled with fire, smoke, and confusion. Men who had stood calm over consoles were suddenly fighting for their ship, their shipmates, and themselves. Casualties were heavy. Damage control teams did what trained sailors always do. They stayed, they fought, and they kept the hull afloat. England lived, but she would not return to the long hunts that had made her famous. In the months that followed, the cold logic of war returned to the ledger. Repairs would take time and resources the fleet needed elsewhere. The decision was made to withdraw her from frontline work. She had already given the U.S. Navy something far more durable than steel, a way to fight submarines that worked, and the proof that it could be done again and again by crews who trained like hers. Even in ending, the legend grew a second chapter. Not long after the war, a new ship carried the name England, a guided missile leader that would serve for decades, the Promise. In that famous line was kept for a time, then set aside. Today, the name is absent from the list, but the standard remains. Talk to sailors who study anti-submarine warfare, and you'll hear the same respect. A small escort, a new weapon, and 12 days that still read like fiction until you check the charts. So here's where I want you to lean in. This story isn't just about a record. It's about how quickly a Navy can adapt when a crew on a small ship proves the math in salt water. If you've served on sonar, on the bridge, or in damage control, if someone in your family did, drop a comment with what this kind of teamwork means to you. If you've walked the decks of a destroyer escort in a museum, tell us which one. If you study code breaking, tell us how intelligence pointed these ships to the right patch of sea. Your voice turns an old action report into living memory. And stay with me, because the final act brings everything together. The numbers behind the record, what official histories actually say about each kill, and how that simple, unforgettable line from the Navy's top deck became part of the service's language. We'll close with why the disbelief in our title was an exaggeration. It was the natural reaction to a result that no one had ever seen before, and no ship has matched since. 6 submarines in 12 days, and not a rumor among sailors, but a sequence you can follow on a chart. First I, 16, then RO, 106, RO, 104, RO, 116, RO, 108, and finally RO, 105. Each engagement logged by England's crew. Each loss later mirrored in Japanese records. That's why disbelief turned into doctrine. What looked impossible became a template the fleet could teach. Here's what changed because of that template. Training commands leaned into continuous contact attacks. Hold the echo all the way in. Compute the fall time of the projectiles, lead a turning target so the ring arrives where the submarine will be. Sonar teams drilled the calm cadence of range, bearing, and depth. Fire control teams practiced translating that cadence into a firing solution without losing the picture. Deck crews shaved seconds from reloads without cutting a single safety corner. The point wasn't flash. The point was repeatability. And beyond the training rooms, the mindset shifted. The forward-throwing, contact fused pattern wasn't an experiment anymore. It was the standard. Its logic was brutally clear. If the charges detonated, you knew you had struck solid metal. If they didn't, you still had a readable sea and an unbroken track. No 15-minute blackout from thunderous depth charges. No guessing games dressed up as tactics. For a navy that needed to keep routes open across whole oceans, that clarity was gold. Recognition followed. A formal citation named the ship and her crew for extraordinary heroism against enemy submarines. The commanding officer, Walton B. Pendleton, received high honors for leadership under pressure, calm, disciplined, and relentlessly methodical. And from the top of the Navy came a line so clean that sailors still quote it. There would always be an England in the United States Navy. Short words, long shadow. On the other side of the ocean, the reaction was quieter because it had to be. Patrol stations went silent. Boats stopped reporting. There were no survivors to send explanations. Only later, after the paperwork of war had been gathered and compared, did the names, dates, and positions from Japanese records settle onto the American charts like two photographs in perfect register. That's why this story is more than legend. The evidence matches from both directions. England herself didn't turn into a museum piece or a parade ship. She went back to the work destroyer escorts were built for: convoy duty, carrier screens, anti-submarine patrols, where the best outcome is that nothing dramatic happens. The weapon she had proven spread across the fleet with updated procedures and confidence to match. You can trace the line from those 12 days to the way later crews thought about the approach, the attack, and the verification. But sea stories don't end just because a record stands. Months after the last submarine went down, England met a different kind of danger. The kind that falls out of the sky fast, burns hot, and cares nothing for sonar ranges. In the brutal spring of 1945, small ships around Okinawa absorbed wave after wave of desperate attacks. England was hit hard. In one instant, compartments that had been models of quiet precision became scenes of fire and damage control. Men were killed. Many were wounded. The ship survived the strike, but the cost was heavy, and her frontline days were over. It's a sobering counterpoint to the triumph. A hunter that had moved with such cold accuracy could still be hurt in a heartbeat by an enemy willing to trade an aircraft for a ship. Yet even in that pain, England had already given the Navy something that outlasted steel, a proof that skill, patience, and a forward-thrown strike could turn an ocean's uncertainty into solvable problems. So when someone says a tiny Escort sank 6 submarines in 12 days, and the Japanese couldn't believe it, you'll know why the disbelief made sense, and why the records erase it. This wasn't a miracle run. It was intelligence pointing to the right patch of sea, radar that caught the brief window on the surface, sonar that never let go, a weapon that didn't blind its own ears, and a crew that treated every pass like math done under pressure. In our final chapter, we'll put numbers to the narrative. The day-by-day sequence with dates and positions, how official histories describe each kill, what intelligence really contributed, and why that simple line from the Navy's highest office became part of the service's language. We'll close with a challenge and an invitation to keep this kind of precision and teamwork in living memory. Here's the ledger that turns our title from shock to fact: 6 submarines, 12 days, a sequence you can trace. I-16, intercepted after code-breaking pointed the way, Dove to escape, found and finished by a forward-thrown pattern. R106, surfaced to charge at night, Dove under the beams, tracked through the turns, destroyed by a pattern that met the hull instead of chasing it. R104, an elusive target that beat back multiple attacks until England closed, corrected, and broke her apart. R116, tried shallow water and sharp maneuvers. England adjusted depth and timing and made the hits count. R108, caught, driven under, and struck with near-simultaneous detonations that left no doubt. R105, the longest, hardest duel. Patience, conservation of ammunition, and one more precise solution at dawn. Those are not rumors. They're entries on a chart and in 2 sets of archives that agree. Intelligence put hunters on the right patch of ocean. Radar caught the brief window when a submarine had to breathe. Sonar held the thread while the ship closed. And the weapon, thrown forward, contact-fuzed, let England attack without silencing her own ears. Misses were quiet. Hits were unmistakable. That clarity is why disbelief gave way to doctrine. What did the Navy do with proof? It taught it. Training commands drilled continuous contact attacks. Sonar operators practiced the comm cadence that fed a firing solution in real time. Fire control officers learned to lead a moving, turning, diving target by the seconds it took the projectiles to fall. Deck crews turned reloads into muscle memory. The goal was never drama. The goal was repeatable results under pressure. Recognition followed the facts. A presidential unit citation named the ship and her crew for extraordinary heroism against enemy submarines. Lieutenant Commander Walton B. Pendleton received the Navy Cross for leadership that was precise, disciplined, and relentlessly steady. And from the top of the Navy came a line sailors still say out loud because it feels like a promise. There would always be an England in the United States Navy. Across the ocean, disbelief was real, but paperwork is patient. Patrol stations went silent. Boats stopped reporting. There were no survivors to give explanations. After the war, when records were compared, the names, dates, and positions from the Japanese side settled onto the American charts with a click you can almost hear. The pattern was undeniable. A small escort had cut through a picket line designed to see an invasion coming, and in doing so, forced both sides to rethink how submarines could be hunted. England kept working after those 12 days. Escorts aren't built for headlines. They're built to make sure bigger ships can do their jobs. But war changes shape. In 1945, the danger came fast from the sky, and even the best submarine hunter could be hurt in a single strike. England survived that blow because sailors stayed at their stations and fought for their ship. She would not return to the long hunts, but she didn't need to. The lesson she proved was already in the fleet. Find, fix, fire, verify. So when you hear, Japanese couldn't believe one escort sank 6 subs in 12 days, remember that disbelief made sense, until the charts and the archives lined up. This wasn't luck. It was discipline and method, intelligence and sensors, geometry and nerve. It was a crew turning an ocean's uncertainty into a solvable problem, again and again, until a record was set that still stands. If this story earned your respect, give it a like so more people see it. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Every week we bring you World War II history told with proof, not myths. And now I want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Did someone in your family serve at sea, on sonar, on the bridge, or in damage control? Drop a comment and add your voice to the record. Your stories keep these names alive.